There's been a Multishot Amazon video popping up lately that was sent to me because there's a lot of people questioning the validity of the video, or at least questioning whether the setup itself is possible. So for today's episode, we're going to cover a basic Multishot Amazon that uses the rune word Faith to achieve their speed, with a focus on achieving reasonable damage. Before we dive in though, the reason people are suspicious of the source video is due to the lack of any inventory screen or stat screen, but it is a feasible, legitimately possible build, even though it looks like they're using a lot of fine or sharp charms of inertia, which would likely be dupes. There are also some key differences in build design between what's in the video and what we're using here to make this more feasible for people to drop into the build and be able to play with it with found or traded gear. For example, in our build, stat-wise, I'm leaning a bit more towards safety with the standard goal of enough strength and dexterity for equipment and the remainder into vitality. This gives us enough punch with our gear to take things down quickly and a lot of life even without call to arms, and would give us an obscene amount of life with it. Whereas in the video in question, the player has instead opted for a glass cannon loadout, which we can tell from their life total, which is the tactic of getting enough strength for gear, then putting every last bit of your points into dexterity to maximize your damage output, which is not insignificant since it's 1% boosted per point in dexterity for bows, which would amount to a difference of a bit over 400% enhanced damage between the builds, applied like an aura at the cost of cutting your life pretty much in half. Though both can work, and if you're comfortable with lower life, it is fine to max dex. Mainly, this difference is why they can achieve their damage output without their mercenary aura being triggered. In terms of skills, in the video we see them use 4 primary skills: Valkyrie, Multishot, Guided Arrow, and Magic Arrow. This is not strange, and we went in much the same route. Enough Multishot to get to 24 arrows while equipped, because that's the maximum, enough Magic Arrow to get it to free, and then maxing out our Guided Arrow for lower cost and higher damage, maxing out Valkyrie and Decoy to make her pretty much unkillable, and putting the remainder into Critical Strike to boost our DPS. Though if you feel like you aren't hitting enough, you can invest in Penetrate instead, but this really should not be an issue at this gear level. I also did go down to Pierce just to work with our setup to make it easier to wipe out large packs without having to worry about collision, though I only needed 1 point in it thanks to the rest of our gear. On the subject of gear though, what our mercenary is using is actually really important to this formula, and likely is part of the reason why most people are kind of missing how this build works, and that is the use of the Pride Polearm for its concentration aura, which is a great boon for our damage on top of our other bonuses. This combined with using a Might Mercenary will help us punch much harder than most people would expect from a Boazon. As far as the rest of the mercenary gear, we go with the usual resistances in Leech, in this case a Vampire's Gaze and a Fortitude. On ourselves though, we obviously have to go with the Faith Bow, which I have in a Grand Matron bow, but it would be a bit faster firing, albeit lower base damage in a Matriarchal bow, but you can overcome a good portion of this gap with other damage boosting gear and the dexterity trick we mentioned earlier. The main reason for using this bow though is for the increased attack speed from Fanaticism, so if you happen to want to make one that you would work in both your Amazon as well as an Act 1 mercenary for other characters, a base such as Great Bow would probably be better and would fit exceptionally well for this build too, since you're not as reliant on plus skills as other bow based builds. You just lose some of the plus skills for that, so it's not super important for this build specifically. That said, while our main use of it is for Fanaticism, the Faith bonuses outside of that are pretty solid too, as you can tell, and all of our auras do affect the returned we spawn too. Armor-wise, since we need more damage, we went with Fortitude. This armor has quite a few nice perks, but our main goal with it here is to take advantage of the massive percent increase in damage bonus on this armor. It helps compensate for the fact that there is no such thing as a bow mastery or the such to augment our damage naturally. So packing on percent bonuses like this will help out a great deal, especially if we are doing the aforementioned dexterity tricks or getting a high plus damage mercenary. For the rest of our gear, we're just focusing on augmenting all this damage and getting other useful perks, with our gloves being the standard Lava Gout for natural increased attack speed and auto cast enchant for boosted attack rating of course. Our boots are War Travelers, adding a pinch of extra damage, stats, magic find to give us a little bit of extra item finding luck. Belt wise, we went with Razor Tail for its natural 33% pierce, which with our skill gives us each arrow 96% chance to pierce with our current setup. Not to mention Razor Tail also gives us a pinch of damage and dexterity. On rings, we use the standard dual leech ring to keep our mana and life topped off, and the Raven Frost to keep us from getting chilled to keep our attack speed up, so we don't have to worry about anything but Holy Freeze there. The two more likely contentious choices are going to be our helmet, which is the giant skull I usually drop onto certain rogue builds, since I already had some Jewels of Fervor in it, since we needed a chunk of this speed to hit our next breakpoint, though we did go a bit over, so you don't necessarily need all of this. The helmet also provides a little bit of crushing blow, and more importantly, knockback, so we can keep tougher enemies at bay in the rare case they don't get chewed down by our volleys of death. The other contentious choice is going to be Atma's Scarab, which I mostly included in here because we don't have any form of physical immune counter outside of Magic Arrow for this character. This chance of amp helps with that a ton, and resulted in a lot of physical immunes getting destroyed by our Multishot by centering them in the shot in their general direction while clearing out their allies with the flanking shots. I also wanted to throw this in there because it so rarely gets the credit it deserves, and this is a good build for letting it shine. For charms, I just tossed on a random spattering of sharp and fine charms of various suffixes to give a more normal reflection of just how a normal player's build would perform on this without access to a duped library. If you want faster run walk for clear speed, then definitely you want fine charms of inertia, though whether you're going to go for walk speed or damage will decide how you mix these up. You can actually even get higher max damage with suffixes as well, though most people won't be running perfects here and will just kind of go for what they can get. Overall, the Multishot Amazon is not my favorite bow build, but she's very competent and exceptionally good at crowd management with the right gear, even with the Multishot damage penalty. So do you have a favorite Amazon build? Do you love or hate bows? Mention them down below and we might hit them up as part of the build series. And as always, a special thanks to the channel members, patrons, and regular viewers for making this content possible.